Okay, well, it's 4:02. Why don't we get started here? So this is the meeting of the Facility Subcommittee, and of the Community Center Task Force, Feasibility Task Force. So first order of business is just to welcome everybody. So thanks for coming even on a nice, beautiful day. Appreciate your time and effort. And we need to approve the 10/26 meeting minutes. Are there any comments before?
Yeah, I have one. I'm not sure. It's item number 4. Discussions of concepts and next steps.
Yep.
Second paragraph. Similar stacked.
Oh,
Stacked instead of staked.
got it.
That's the only comment I had.
Well, they're going to have to stack them and stake them. So, yeah.
Okay.
All right. So noted. Any other comments? So
Move to accept.
move to accept subject to Bill's comment on item number 4. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. So we're going to move on for Nan and Tom. I don't know if Tom's on today, but for sure.
No, he's not going to be on today.
Okay. Nan and Aaron, and to kind of take us through revised concepts and our next iteration. We've been going through iterations of this, so I think this is probably iteration number 3, right? I believe.
Could very well be.
Go ahead, Nan. You've got the floor.
Yeah, I think we're going to start just as a follow-up to the last meeting with the OHM has developed some options, the 2 options that we had talked about previously with based on the feedback from the city engineer's office, and also updated the parking information.
Okay.
Just have them review that briefly.
That'd be good. All right.
And I don't know, I have it up if you want me to share my screen, or Rick, you can share yours if you want me, if you prefer.
Yeah, definitely share the screen. That'd be helpful.
Yeah, let me see if I can
I need to
share
make
mine.
you a panel, or oh no, I don't have this. This isn't my meeting. Never mind.
Okay, can you see my screen?
Mhm.
Okay,
Yes.
great. So this is not a big change from what you saw previously. The concept and the layout are the same. I don't recall there being any significant comments toward that. The comments that there were, as Nan mentioned, to add the parking data so that it was front and center so everybody understood where that was. And so this is similar to what we've been talking about for the previous several meetings. Community center spaces required, 250 spaces. We include city office, city assembly for a total of 372. We have a shared parking deduction of 18% based on a model that we had presented a while back. So that's minus 66 from that 372. We add in police dedicated parking spaces, 55 spaces. So that's not reduced, it's not shared. So we add that in on top of it, and the total is 361. Parking provided in this concept with the surface spaces utilizing most of the existing south parking, and then some kind of parallel parking along the north side is 78 spaces. And then there's a 4-level parking structure embedded within this footprint. That's 284 spaces. So that's a total of 362. So that's hits pretty much right on the money for the parking. In this concept, something to think about, this shows expansion area. If the pool ends up on one side or the other, it could be expanded with the parking count being so close. We might want to think about, does that force a need for additional parking? And so how does that play into it? Something to think about as concepts evolve in the future. I think the big item that came up for us in terms of the comments was to integrate the comments that came from the city engineer's staff office about access and site access and traffic. So what you see here is access option 1. Main entrance would be from Kenny Road. There'd be a signal at this intersection with Rue de Fleur, and that would bring you into the site and you'd circulate around. Tremont Road would be what I would call kind of a secondary access. It would have a right in, right out here at the driveway that is shared across the street from the golf course. In this scheme, this includes what the engineer's office called a bike lane with flexible delineator posts on Tremont Road. And then option 2, again, the same layout for the site. The difference here is the signalized intersection flips over to Tremont Road. The intersection over on Kenny remains as is for the most part. Somebody had mentioned in our last meeting, it might have been Dan, I don't remember, that there was room for a bike path on the golf course side of Tremont. And so likely that would probably be the preferred location for that. And so this shows a bike path on that side of the road. And then a roundabout incorporated into the intersection at Tremont and Kenny. And what you see here graphically is an approximation of a 2-lane roundabout and how that kind of starts to eat into this green space. And so where this is placed is so that it doesn't eat into the property of the golf course or the church or the I think these are condos over across the street. So the flexibility there is into the green space on the MSC site. And so those are the updates as it relates to the MSC site.
Couple quick questions. You may have answered this before. The police parking, the 55 spaces, does that include both the policemen coming and parking and the police cars that are parked there? Because I know there's both.
Yeah, we asked staff what the parking need for them was, and 55 was the number that came out. I think 55 is the number that they have now. And so that covers, I believe, the squad cars, staff coming and going and shift changes and that sort of thing.
Okay. And then second, this is a comment, not a question. I know that on that option 2, city engineer looked at also tying into Kenny Road, not through Rue de Fleur, putting a left turn lane in there.
With a left turn lane, we had a prior concept that was in reference to where we had an entry coming in kind of mid-block.
And that was kind of, oh, go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, so that was with the idea that some parking was going to extend up kind of northward around the building. And we were wrestling with the size of the building and its placement within the site and not getting into the northern green space. And so all of those things, as they started to come together, kind of pushed that parking out from this edge. Mm-hmm. And having a connection there didn't make a whole lot of sense when there was an existing connection here.
There's no doubt that the Rue de Fleur connection probably functions better, but if we were to end up going this way, I think we'd get a lot of pushback from the Trouville people regarding that being a shared entrance. So it's a comment. You can just make note of it. That
sure.
We need to maybe look at that.
I have a quick comment on it, though I hope we don't end up with dealing with this location. But given that, I don't think there's any question that the preferred entrance with the traffic light is clearly off of Tremont. Having the main entrance off of Kenny does not make any sense for access at all for most of the community. So
I would agree. Yeah, for some reason, I mean, when you're on Kenny, you don't feel like you're even in Upper Arlington until you get beyond, it's kind of on the border. So, and I think, I don't know whether it's mutually exclusive, but I think the bike path as a separate path on Tremont Road is a whole lot better. What you're showing there is a whole lot better than a bike lane with delineators. Those delineators end up getting all busted up and you know, people are going pretty fast down that road anyway. So a separate bike path is certainly a lot better if we can make that work. Any other questions or comments from everybody before we move on?
I just will
I'm
agree.
not sure. Am I allowed? Sorry.
Oh, that was Linda. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, am I okay to make a comment or ask a question rather?
Sure.
I'm not, well, two things. One, about Kenny Road, I think for the people in Trouville, Kenny Road is kind of an important connection because a lot of times, you know, you use that. Would there be any consideration to making the entrance, the drop-off entrance one way and make the entrance in from Kenny, if you had a light there, and the exit at the Tremont light, just to, because I think the traffic near Trouville is really going to be a tough thing. I've seen some things online and some concerns already if this site were to go. The other thing that I wondered about was if the police get called to leave in an emergency situation, would the lights or anything, you know, be stopped somehow to, because we'll have kids there and we'll have people in cars and young people learning to drive, just learn to drive, pull out of there. How will we protect kids from the police coming in and out of there in a fast pace? Just questions or thoughts.
I think that's a great question,
Yeah, it is.
because obviously I assume in most cases they're going out on Tremont. I don't know that for sure.
Why they go out, I see them, I'm sorry, Greg. I see them go out both ways, you know, when I've been over there. And well, I think they go out that back when they're in a hurry and they go on to Kenny, because then you can kind of bust it, you know, move a little more quickly, you know.
So if we do go down this route, one of the other options would be to pull the police function out of this and move them over to Reed Road, next to the fire, either in a new building next to or build an addition onto the fire station or something like that. So it is something that if we progress down this path, that
Right.
will be a separate decision point that we'll have to figure out. There's a whole host of challenges and concerns about having a police station along with a holding pen and all that kind of stuff in a community center. And it's all solvable, but if we end up down this route, there's a whole host of options we'll have to look at there.
Okay. But I think going forward on option 2, I would show that entry coming off Kenny, because I'm pretty sure that's what city engineer had shown on that option 2.
They did. Yeah, we'll show that back in.
Okay. Just for the record, I think it's good. I mean, still, if we go down this route, we'll need to study it more, but for sure.
Agreed.
Okay.
Okay, are you ready to move to the Kingsdale site?
Yep.
Okay, can you all see that now?
Yep.
So we've just made a few refinements to this and we're going to continue to refine this. We have another level of refinement that'll probably take place between now and Thursday for the task force meeting. But some of the minor refinements we've made is on this ground level showing, instead of on-street parking all the way along here, showing a drop-off lane, and then activating the streetscape a little bit, which would have planters and benches and some things there in place of that parking. That still needs to be vetted with Continental, but that's what we think really ought to be happening here. And then also just some minor revisions to this level, just to increase a little bit of service. Still have the main entrance, a separate lobby for the office, and the same functions that you've seen previously on this floor. So I'm just gonna move along to the next slide. So we did make a modification, and I guess I could have pointed this out in the last slide too, to where the stair is. We had this connecting stair going all the way down to the ground level, but we feel like this is a location that allows us to still have the overlook and the sense of that monumental stair from the lobby, but also allows us to get a little more service space into that first floor level. So this is where we have the fitness and the group X, and you can just see a little more delineation of that with some of the storage rooms. And we've added some extra like small toilet rooms and things just to give a sense of that on this level. Still overlooks the pool. So this is essentially the same with a few minor modifications. Similarly on this level, we've added locker rooms on this level and access to the locker rooms. And I think a couple meetings ago, we added the game room and the adventure play and analytic fitness to this front area. So that still remains. And we still have our gymnasiums and storage on this level, as well as some staff space. And then on this next level, it's pretty much the same. There was a question about how many laps it is per mile around the track. It's approximately 8. So this, again, there would just be a couple of small restrooms on this level. And when we get up to the 5th level, excuse me, we have, again, made a few additional modifications here. We are going to flip a couple things around before Thursday to really allow the connection between the demonstration kit. We're going to flip this little group of rooms here to allow a better connection between the demonstration kitchen and the multi-use space. We're going to show this wall being opened up to really allow these views out to this patio, and also to get the storage off of it. So we're going to do some other refinements to this plan, and we're still showing some staff space and this office, or what could potentially be partner space on this level, and a large outdoor patio. So that's still pretty much the same. And then the next 2 levels, we did go ahead and show, we're really envisioning that there'd be like a 2-story mechanical space. So we're showing that on both the 6th level and the 7th level. So you can see that here, and obviously when the building gets actually designed, that will be more specifically located, but we're thinking this makes sense from a service perspective. And then we're still showing this building massing and stacking diagram. So I want to just see if there are any questions on the plans, if you want me to flip back through any of those.
Hey, Nan, can you go back to level 5? There was something that you pointed out the other day that was helpful for me in terms of some context. So the multi-use room, what did you say the occupancy was on that, or the capacity?
Yeah, it's 250 at like 10 top tables. So that's something we're also going to show, is like we're showing some furniture down here. We're going to try to put some tables in to just give a sense of scale. So this is a pretty large room. You know, you could handle a large function there, and at table and chair seating. And also that deck is pretty large. You can get a sense of that, how big that is.
Yeah, Wendy's reaction was exactly my reaction. I read Wendy's lips and I saw her say, "Oh, wow." So that's part of why I wanted to come back to this. And it's helpful to give everybody a sense of scale for the building.
I've got a question. What flooring would you use there?
Well, it really depends. I mean, I don't know. We might use carpeting, you know, we might use a hard surface. I mean, that's something we would get into probably.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's a detail and I understand that, but I'm just asking the question only because if you did it with a more of a hard surface, you might have additional uses for there.
Yeah, I mean, I think it'll be a room that's well utilized, because, you know, there's nothing else like it around here that can accommodate that many people. I mean, I guess there's some spaces in churches, but as a public kind of space.
Right.
I'm wondering if it will have the ability to divide it into smaller spaces.
Yeah, it will. I mean, or it can, I should say, typically it does, so that, you could have the Rotary could meet here, or while someone else is meeting in another room, or, something like that. There could be multiple meetings happening when you don't have a large event.
We saw that at the Westerville Community Center, and they said they use it a lot as a big space, but then also as many small spaces, sometimes at the same time. So that it seems like that flexibility would be nice.
Yeah, so, and some of these smaller rooms also have a subdivider. So we do have multi-purpose room there that, well, actually, I think here that subdivides, so you could have a large program in there as well. And it could be an art class, or it could, more of a craft class. Maybe we would have a dedicated art room on this floor. And, you could have a judo class, or you could have, there could just be a lot of different uses for these smaller meeting rooms as well. So if are there any other questions on the floor plans?
I have another quick question. You call it the Monumental Stairs? How
Yeah,
many floors up does that go?
well, so we have these more typical fire stairs, egress stairs, and then the
Right.
second stair. So this does not currently, the way this is laid out, go up to the next level. And that's something we'd have to talk about during a design phase, is do you want the elevators and the stair to continue in some way, or have potential to continue? Because if this becomes community center, that might be desirable, but that's something that can be worked out during the schematic design whenever that happens.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
I mean, you could always make provision for it in terms of the steel framing and stuff like that and build it in later if you expand it.
yeah.
I'm not sure you'd want it to go up. If it's,
I don't think you'd want it to go up now if you're, as long as it's a different use and different office, which it would be initially. So any other questions or comments about the plans before we move on to the budget?
can you go to where the esports and the, I forget what you call it, ninja sports or whatever that's called again? I can't remember
Yeah.
what the name is.
We don't know exactly what it'll be, but
Adventure play and analytical fitness. Got it.
yeah,
That's 2-story space or 1-story space?
it's 2-story space. And actually, one of the things that we talked about adding on this level is looking at actually maybe taking a portion of this, or making this child watch space, and maybe bumping some of the, because we've been tossing around the idea of stacking this and doing some of this on the track level, but we think it makes more sense maybe to make this change child watch, because it's right off the lobby, and we think that'd be a better location for it. So that's something we're going to add back in here.
I mean, for those of you who went on the tour, Westerville has that brand new, what would you call it? Analytical fitness space, or I'm not sure what you call it, but it's, you call it Ninja, but it's pretty cool looking. I guess they haven't been able to use it because of COVID yet, correct? But it would be interesting to see once, COVID's not an issue, how well that gets used and how many people participate in that. But it looks interesting. So I imagine they've gotten good feedback on that, Nan, have they?
As far as I know, yes, it's been very positive, but like you said, it hasn't been really used. I know Logan from our office got to test it out.
Oh, yeah.
Works out quite a bit and thought it was great, but yeah, it's something that's very popular, and it is also something that with time can be flexible, so that when the next thing that comes in, you can take that out and put in whatever the next thing is. And I think it's important to think about that kind of flexibility in these spaces as they get developed.
So that adventure play is 2-story space then, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And there may be a climbing wall, or, we don't really know exactly what'll be in here yet, but looking at some of those elements.
Okay.
Any other comments or inquiries about different plan levels? Okay. So I wanted to just share this preliminary project budget. This really is just looking at the, so we were asked to focus primarily on the Kingsdale site for this meeting. And so where last meeting we presented things just based on our historical cost data on a square foot basis. And we kind of had started with a square foot cost for each line item in the program and then extrapolated that to get an overall like aquatic square footage, athletic square footage, and then to get a overall square footage and then use that as our cost estimating basis. This time we looked at it more of a systems basis. So what is the site work cost? What is the structure, substructure cost? What is the superstructure cost? Again, based on our historical cost data. And then we also approached 2 contractors to try to vet those numbers and ensure that we're in the ballpark and not missing something for the local market compared to sort of the national market that our database is based on. And really the feedback we got from both of those firms was that we're in the right ballpark. Their breakdowns and some of the detail were a little bit different than ours, but overall, they're confident that this approximately $50 million number for the community center is on target. And if you really looked at all of the spaces, which would be the office space and a potential partner / office, additional office space, we're in just under the $70 million. And that I think the thinking is still that, the community center cost would be financed and dealt with a little separately from the office cost, which my understanding is that the intent is to have that covered through long-term leases and potentially a partner down the road, or if one is identified for some of that additional square footage. But this essentially affirmed the numbers. We were at 51 million previously for the community center, and we're just a little bit under that. And, our hope is really that these might still come down a little bit. We're still carrying some pretty conservative contingency numbers, and both in terms of construction and design. And, we're hopeful that as this would come together, we could sharpen the pencil, and as long as there weren't any really intense inflationary aspects, that these numbers would be on target.
So
So, go ahead.
Well, so to confirm the total project budget versus the hard construction cost, can you just explain the differences there so everybody understands?
Yeah, so the difference, so the hard construction cost is what you'd expect, say, the bid to be on the project, what the contractor would build it for. And then the difference between these numbers are the soft costs. So in this case, we have professional fees, which would be, of course, architects and engineers fees, legal fees, probably owner's rep fees. There's a variety of professional services fees that would be included in that. We also have the FF&E, which is the furniture, fixtures, and equipment for the building. So that would, in the construction cost, we have some of the equipment for the community center. On top of that, we have some of the furnishings as a soft cost. So, and this is also assuming that the office space is built as basically a core and shell, which means that that wouldn't be built out until you had a tenant, and that would be worked out into that lease. Some of the other costs, there are required inspections during construction. There may be some soils or geotechnical reports, and some owner contingency to carry on the project itself, just for some unknown or unanticipated costs. Because there's usually something that comes up either when you're excavating the site, or you decide you want to make really the contingency is not really intended for, you want to make a change in the program. That would usually typically not be included as part of that contingency, but just something unknown that comes up. So
So are the
Um,
contingencies being carried in the 43 million or in the, well,
they're carried in both. So in the hard cost for construction, we're carrying a 9% design contingency and a 9% construction contingency. And we're carrying like 1 or 2% owner contingency down here. We also have some pretty good markups right now on the contractor's costs. So the general conditions and overhead and profit. Some of that will definitely be shifting around. And in the next couple weeks, we are also having one of the contractors do a detailed cost estimate. This again was just a high altitude look at this based on anticipated square foot costs and some of the same systems we were looking at, but they are actually going to do a more detailed estimate. So we should have that for our next pass at cost, just to be sure we're really on track. But so we're going to vet this one more time at the next level of detail. But so far, we think we're on track. Any other questions on the budget?
Hey, Nan, just to confirm, the 50 or almost 51 does include all the equipment, fixturing, turnkey, correct?
Yeah.
so fitness equipment and all that stuff, that's pretty expensive, right?
Yeah, so this is the basketball hoops and the room dividers and, you know, the,
Yep.
yeah. So that's really what we have for today, although we need to probably, I want to just flip to this slide. So we have, so we actually have a task force meeting on Thursday. So I'm not sure what I was thinking when I was putting this together, but this is more the December schedule. So maybe I'll just take the screen down for now and I can pull it back up if anyone has a question, because I want to just be sure that we're on target for the task force meeting on Thursday. So we would be presenting this update from the facilities committee, as well as what Leon's been doing with the finance subcommittee to give updates on both of those elements. So I just want to be sure that everyone's on board with that and that we present that information. I think Leon has sent out his slides today for just preliminary review. And this is, I guess one question I have is, do we want to just focus on Kingsdale, or do you want to also do a review of the whole MSC site and just show that it's basically where it was at our last task force meeting with some updates to the site? Or what do you want to be sharing with the task force?
Well, I think you need to be showing them both.
Okay.
Obviously, we've got more detail on Kingsdale, but and I think one important thing to make sure, it's not shown here today, but I know we did that real preliminary estimate on MSC, and I think it's just important for everybody to understand the delta between the two.
Hey, Greg and Nan, I'm gonna, so tonight we're doing another presentation to council, and I think it might actually be helpful, and nobody but me knew I was gonna do this, and I actually didn't think about doing it until right now, but if you'll indulge me for a minute, I did a slide that I want to share a slide that I'm gonna do for council tonight that I think summarizes where we are with the different options. So we're getting a lot of stuff from people in the community about, you know, what are the scenarios that we're looking at, and how does this all play through? And I put this together today to kind of try and summarize things. And I think, you know, the top three, well, all of them are kind of things that we've been talking about. And I think this is helpful to summarize things for folks. So, you know, really as we look at it, and these are round numbers, but, you know, the community center built at Kingsdale with Continental, you know, let's call it 50 million. The TIF's going to generate just under $18 million. And so it's a net cost of 32. If you look at the community center built at the MSC with a Kingsdale project going forward, going back to the numbers that Nan and the team did earlier, it's about a $75 million building here. The TIF goes up a little bit because you've got more private development at the Kingsdale site that we can use to finance here. And so that gets us to a net cost of 52 million. The other one that I would have you guys focus on, just so that you know, as you're out talking to people in the community, some folks have said, well, why didn't the city just buy the site and build the community center there? And it really, you add 12.5 million for the cost of the land, you take away the TIF revenue. It's a little cheaper building because you can do a flat, you can do a shorter building. So ballpark, you're talking about a $60 million building. I think this was the first time I've kind of synthesized in one place kind of the interaction between the work that you all have been doing and the work that the finance subcommittee's been doing. And so I think this is a good, as I was listening to the conversation, I thought this might be helpful for you all to see, to kind of crystallize a little bit of what you all have been doing and how that interplays with other folks we've been talking to, and just so that you all can see that it's not, we're taking the work that you all have been doing and kind of combining it in other places to bring it to a kind of single comprehensive look. So anyway, we can talk about this in more detail if you want, but I did think it would be helpful to show you all that we're getting to that point of being able to have these kinds of conversations.
I'm sure one point of that you and I talked about, Steve, but it probably confuses things. The TIF actually generates more than the 18 million, but there's other things that TIF's going for other than just the community center.
Yeah, right.
Like
right.
Parking garage and things like that. So
yeah,
the TIF's pretty healthy, but 18 million of it's going to the community center. So.
Yeah. So when you get to the question of how deep to go into the MSC site, I mean, the numbers I think end up, my expectation is that the numbers will drive the task force in a certain direction.
Going around, sorry, you pulled that down.
Do you want me to pull it back up?
Yeah, so this is in essence, option one is a $32 million deal. Option two is 52 million, and I can't see
60,
right? So doesn't take a rocket scientist to kind of figure out which way we ought to go, I think.
Oops, sorry.
Linda's dog agrees too.
Hey, Steve, what is the revenue to the school on option one? Is that a number you have? Is it the same? Is it the 687?
So on options 1 and 2, the agreement with the proposal to the schools is that we hold them harmless. They currently get $123,000 a year off of that site. The TIF agreements, as we are drafting them, have them maintaining that plus any additional millage that's put on, they would get the full portion of that. So, let's say when they go to the ballot in next year, they add, and I have no idea what they're going to add, but let's say they add a mill. They would get that whole mill they would get the whole mill that they add, but not the replacement portion of the levy.
Okay.
And again, on option 4, that if we were to build a standalone community center, their take ends up going to 0 because then it's all a public use on the site. And then I think the other thing that's important from a kind of community communication standpoint is there is a risk that if the Continental project falls through, and I'd say it's a fairly high risk, that 2/3 of the value on the auditor's site of that property is the building. basically, if Kroger is calculating that they're going to hold on to that property for more than 2 years, it makes sense for them to go ahead and tear it down and reduce the taxable value of the property. And, the schools could end up losing on the order of, $50,000 to $80,000 a year if Kroger comes in and tears that building down and does nothing with the site.
Mhm.
Steve, I think you're leaving out a cost on it being at the MSC. That's either associated with the capital cost or not, but the logistical cost of continuing to maintain the operation would cost some money too. And I would say it's probably not insignificant.
Oh, no. And look, that MSC number is low because it doesn't include the roundabout and the traffic light and all that sort of stuff. I didn't feel the need to, as they say, gild the lily on those numbers. And I felt like the numbers already speak for themselves without getting into too much other stuff.
I also have a question. If Continental doesn't purchase the process and they take down the building, that was always the intent, and Kroger's paid $10.6 million for it. Why wouldn't that be the land cost?
You'd have to talk to the county. The county auditor has it valued at like 5 or 6 right now.
5.6, I remember it, looking it up, and was staggered by that.
Yeah, no, that's what they got it. Look, I don't know. You'd have to ask them that question.
Well,
But-
it seems like the school would have appealed that. Yeah.
I don't know.
I think the school did something with Kroger. I don't know if they worked out something with them. One other question, Steve, and it's not for this group, but obviously I assume council is going to ask at some point the strategy to come up with the other, if we do it at Kingsdale, the other 32 million, how that's going to work. So I assume the finance group and yourself are going to be working on it.
The finance subcommittees work again. That's why it's been so helpful to have you all really digging into this plan and make sure that Williams has got the right budget number, because what's happening on that committee is they're taking, can I go ahead and take this down?
Sure.
That committee is taking the program and the feedback from this and putting it into the financial models. And so, how that $32 million balance gets paid for is through, using some of our existing cash balances, looking at revenues we can dedicate to support some bonds, and other TIFs that we have in the city and in the area that could support it. And then also, looking at the income tax that would be generated from the project, I think gives us the ability. We're pretty close. One of the objectives the finance subcommittee is working toward is figuring out whether this could be done without going to the voters for a tax increase. We might just get there. I think I don't want to promise. That's why I've been, Nan's heard me a million times talking about, we can't have any surprise, we can't have any surprises in, July or August, and suddenly we've got another $10 million on this building. We've got to get this down. And that's why, going to the level they're going to with construction companies and kind of truing up the numbers and making sure that when the finance committee comes in and looks at it, and then Leon's done a great job with them, also looking at the operational costs. So we're feeling pretty confident that we can be in that kind of 85 to 105% cost recovery on the operational side, including capital reserves factored in. That Leon has spent a lot of time with Debbie and Jeff and the team to try and make sure that we are thinking through how the spaces will be programmed and what the revenue model is. So, that's the work that your brothers and sisters on the finance subcommittee have been working through.
Yeah, and I don't know if you want any high altitude comments from Leon, since we have him on the phone about that, or if you want to wait till the task force for the update on that. But, you know, they've been looking at all of the different programs and, you know, operational aspects. So I don't know if you just want to say a few words about that, Leon?
Yeah, give us a minute or two.
Well, I think the biggest thing is we have a really good performer based on the preliminary design, and staff has been great to work with. We've really got it thought through all of the implications of staffing and requirements and how the building will function and where our price points are in comparison to the local market, other regional markets, and also, you know, just the programming level of the building is fantastic. And so I think everybody, you really delve into it, you really see very much the commitment that to the community and how the community will be able to access this building. And it's really good. I think you'll be really impressed to see all the opportunities that your community has in the building.
Good.
So there'll be a little more detail on that at the task force meeting on Thursday night. And then we're also working towards a community meeting on December 2nd, which is kind of a more recent date that's been thrown out. I think that looks like that's good for our consultant team. And that would primarily be information sharing, just sharing kind of what we've heard, what we've found, and what the plan looks like sort of in advance of the council presentation. I mean, we would need to talk through that a little bit more with the team to really fine tune that, but seems like things are really coming together, and the polling is going to start a week from today, I believe. And so we should get some more data on that in the next couple weeks. And all these pieces are really going to start weaving together even a little more solidly than they've been. So I think we're really on target for kind of those first meetings in December. So again, going through the facilities committee, the task force, the community, and then to the council presentation. So that's where we're heading.
I've got a question on the cost a little bit. Steve, we've got almost $19 million in the office space in cost. Are those self-funding or on the profit side, do you think?
Our assumption is they'll be self-funding. At this point, that's an assumption. We don't have tenants with signed leases at this point, but you guys have heard me riff on how attractive I think that space is going to be.
Yeah.
And the level of confidence that we have in leasing. We are starting to have conversations with kind of the potential, some of the potential partners that we would see in the community center who would be kind of assumed to be almost anchor tenants from that perspective. So, and the response has been pretty good. So, you know, we think there's an opportunity there. That is one of those things that as we get into final design, you know, between when the task force wraps up and we get into final design and even schematic design post approval by the voters, you know, we're going to spend a lot of time really making sure we've got that space sized correctly and economically. Yeah.
And further, this is more of a question for you, Nan, is the fact is you've got a building that's going to be a total of 155,000 square feet. Has the allocation of common cost, is it mostly headed towards the community center? Is it practically applicable, you know, divided amongst the office space too? Because there's a fair amount of common cost in that whole process. And the question is it allocated appropriately, or is it, we've assumed that most of it's going towards the community center?
Yeah.
That was for Nan.
Yeah, I think she was frozen.
Yeah.
I wonder why she.
Yeah, I was going to say,
She was either frozen or completely stumped by your question, Bill.
Well, I mean, you understand the point though, of course.
Yeah, no, I completely get the point. I'm not sure that they've gotten to that level of detail. That's my guess is we might get some more detail on that when the construction company that they're asking to take a look at this dives into the detail on it.
Well, for instance, as an example, you know, big common cost is the design.
Yeah.
And it looks like that's all sitting inside of the community center right now, not taking into account the another 110,000 square feet of office space, which would be a good news for the community center, as long as we self-fund the other.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of grinding on those numbers, figuring out what where, and it's.
And by the way, Steve, I agree with your assessment. That should be very desirable space. Should be, absolutely.
Yeah.
One point or one thing I wanted to mention, I don't think we've talked about it specifically in this committee. If we did, I'm sorry, but I didn't mention it, but we kind of decided, you know, originally our committee was called the Facilities and Partnership Subcommittee. We've kind of decided, you know, the last month or so that it made a lot more sense for the Finance Committee to look at the partnership issue, because it's really a finance issue, an operational issue. And they have been doing that with Leon, talking through those things. So that's why actually on this current agenda, partnerships was eliminated from our name. So if you saw that, that's why. We're letting them take the lead on that, and it makes all the sense in the world for them to be talking about that issue. So we're going to stay focused on the facility.
So, and just a couple quick updates on that. We staff and Leon and that subcommittee took a look at operational partners, you know, obviously primarily being the Y. Without going into all the details, we looked at it and realized, both we and the Y realized it probably wasn't a great match. There are certain situations, communities that don't have as robust of a recreation program as we already have in place. You know, a facility where you've got the ability to have clearly delineated space, that's what's the Y space and what's the community space. Those two things are different than what we have in this situation. So a YMCA kind of as an operator model we don't think it's going to work. And then, you know, in terms of the kind of medical service provider partnership opportunity, you know, what I think basically it's boiled down to is, you know, they're looking at the feasibility of doing this under the assumption. So let's say we don't get somebody to come in, and we don't have that partnership opportunity to help us finance this. Does this whole thing pencil without it? And that way, if we are able to bring somebody in, how does that simply enhance what we know is already going to work? So obviously we know the partners are going to have to pay for their own space. That's part of it. But from an operational standpoint, looking at it as the financial model not being dependent upon having revenue from somebody who's coming in doing PT services in our space. And, you know, that's how we're approaching that.
Okay. Hey, Nan, is she back or is she still gone?
She is on the phone now. So Nan, are you able to hear us now?
If that's her on the phone, she's muted. Bill, I thought the carpet question was going to be the one that would drive her away, but it was the other one. I mean,
anyway, one request for our next meeting, I think it'd be good if we had a really good, and I know it's being worked on, but it'd probably be helpful to have, at least for the record, a good summary of the parking for Kingsdale. I know we had an early one that was pretty general. We have a good one now for MSC. I think we need one also for Kingsdale, just so we know exactly how that's all working. So,
Yeah, and I can tell you, we've got that. We'll actually be presenting. That'll be somebody else's presentation tonight at council. So we'll have something else that we can kind of work through on that, because from the overall development perspective, council's been asking pretty similar questions. So
yeah, I mean, it's a little more complicated, obviously, because it's mixed use. So there's a lot of sharing between the uses. So it's just something I think would be helpful that we have on record from the committee as to how that's going to work. So.
yeah, Rick's been working with Chad on our team and the developer team. So we should be ready to go on that.
Okay. All right. Any other questions before we open it up, Wendy?
I have a question, kind of along the same lines as the parking, and it's about traffic. And is there anything being done about a traffic study, particularly with the high school, like the Kingsdale site, because of the high school?
Yep. No. So a traffic study was done by the developer. There are a number of improvements that they have to do. You know, we'll put in a traffic light. Well, they'll put in a traffic light at Ridgecliff. They'll move the traffic light at on Northwest. And then the big thing that we're looking at is Trentwood, kind of that Trentwood and Brandon, the impacts on those streets. That's where, when you combine it with the high school, there's going to be issues. So Jackie Thiel, who's our director of public service, who is fantastic at figuring these things out. She and Kyle Hoying and Emma are going to meet with folks in that neighborhood, do a Zoom with them to try and get some feedback. You know, what I've talked about with Jackie and Kyle is being really open to pretty dramatic options in terms of what you do to make sure that Trentwood doesn't become basically the Fishinger Road bypass. You know, I've got friends who live on that street. You know, I live a block south of the high school. I will admit it has been that for me once or twice in the past. And I recognize that more vehicles in that area increases the risk of that. I also know that there are some things that we can do to really help with that. It just, you know, and some of them are pretty dramatic and some of them are pretty mundane. And I think that's what Jackie's great at, is figuring out what combination of things gets you to the right solution. That was a long answer to a pretty short question, but I hope I got you there.
No, you did. Just curious if Ackerman to Zollinger is even an option.
No.
Not. I was afraid of that.
Nope. So the last I heard was that somebody told me those woods are part of a literally century-long research study at OSU that's maybe 20 years in. So give it 80 years and then maybe we can talk about it.
You froze on my end. What study did you say?
So there's some kind of a research study with OSU.
Okay.
That basically they're looking at how those woods change over 100 years.
Wow.
Yeah, I don't think OSU has much interest in letting their property become roadway.
No.
Hey, Steve, I have a comment. I saw the notes that Jeff sent, their resident feedback letters, which I thought were really very thoughtful and helpful. I know that we have kind of generally concluded the programming exercise, but I think it would be good to continue iterating. I'm assuming that at the end of this process, and hopefully if the community supports this effort, that all of those letters will be revisited and there will be an opportunity to review the program. Is that your?
Yeah, and you know, one of the great things about working in a community of this size and with this level of resident involvement is that you really can, you know, once you start to get the feedback, you can try and build conversations from it. And so our intent at this point really is to start down that conversation path. And most of the community feedback has been around traffic, you know, and there's been some feedback on things where we just need to do an education point where, you know, some people are concerned about loitering and folks hanging around. And my response to that is literally just about anything would be better than what we have today from a public safety standpoint. And so, you know, some of it is just simply having those kinds of conversations where it's explain and the conversation around, you know, how creative and dramatic can we get in terms of traffic solutions, traffic calming solutions for Trentwood and Brandon. Those are conversations, and the email feedback is a great way for us to kind of gather where we need to go with it, and be able to put some things out toward that. So, yeah.
All right, any other questions, comments?
I pretty much ducked out from Bill's question. Did you want to?
We figured out about the carpet, so.
I think you were asking if some of the costs are like prorated between the uses. Is that?
Yeah, he was asking where you had your cam charge. Did you have the cam charges and other similar charges kind of all loaded in on the community center side, or did you have them somehow allocated between the community center and the office?
So we basically, the way we did our budget is still based on the square foot of building area. So, you know, like the exterior skin of the building and the superstructure are all kind of allocated based on the square footage. So the community center has a particular percentage of that, and the office would have a particular percentage of that. So some of those things, so all of that is based on the actual square footage of the areas. And then some of the areas like the elevators, we did sort of prorate those between the community center and the office use, and some of the HVAC and mechanical spaces. So we attempted to do that, you know, based on kind of the conceptual level of the design at this point. So there is a little bit of overlap still, but we've at least made an attempt at that.
Thank you. That's exactly the answer I was wondering for.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to be sure to answer it.
Thank you.
Otherwise I wouldn't have come back on.
Any more questions from the group? If not, public comment. I think Jeff said there's a couple people. I don't know if they they're just listening or have some comments.
Yeah, we have a couple on. We did not get any requests beforehand.
Well, even if they didn't request, if they have a question or comment, I'm happy to hear it. So if not, that's fine too.
So I see two folks. I think the easiest way to do this is there's a raise your hand feature. If you want to do that, then if you got a comment, then Jeff can pull you into the ability to speak to the meeting. Otherwise, we'll give folks a second to see if they can figure that out and if they have any questions. Not seeing any hands go up.
Okay. Well, if not, you feel free to send an email or whatever. Jeff, what's that again? I don't want to get the address wrong.
Yeah, the best one would be parks@uaoh.net.
Okay. Yeah, feel free to send an email with comments or questions, and we'll try to get some response to you. But we appreciate you joining the meeting today. So with that, unless there's anything else, I think, do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Bill, second?
Second.
You need to. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Thanks for everybody's time. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. See
Thank
ya.
you.